I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. I have to say that I was really excited when Tommy contacted me about doing this webinar because I'm Angelique, I should have said, from SYNKD, and our ethos is to connect the design, build, and maintain sectors of the industry. So this topic of collaboration between landscape architects and landscape contractors is a really, topical issue that we will all have a lot of questions on, and it'll help to explain the process a bit more. And yeah, collaborating between sectors is what it's about. So thank you, Tommy and Jason, for joining me tonight. And we have Tommy from Takeoff Monkey, and we have Jason from Oro Design Group. And just a little bit of housekeeping for those of you that are in our audience. Please submit questions as we go. It's going to be a very casual conversation. So we want you to send in questions. Myself and one of my team members is monitoring the questions. So as they come in, we will interrupt if that's okay and ask some questions of these guys. So Tommy, I'll hand over the baton to you, and maybe you and Jason could introduce yourselves a bit more fully.
Sure. Thank you, Angelique, for putting this together and making this happen. So I'm Tommy Lather. I'm the founder of Takeoff Monkey. We are a takeoff service. We're based here in the U.S. We help landscape contractors bid more with less. We do thousands of takeoffs and irrigation designs. I've spent most of my career as a contractor in an estimating seat. And here with me is my good friend from way back, Jason Nobby with Oro Design.
Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate you guys reaching out to me and extending an invite. This is new to me, so the audience, if I've got my mom said I've had a face for radio, so but yeah, like Tommy said, we've been friends for a long time, and I've been in Austin for about 20 years, and so I'm the principal and co-founder of Oro Design Group, and we started up in 2019 with a business partner of mine, Alex Howe. I previously worked at a firm in Austin called TBG for many years, and then went over to a really large multidisciplinary firm called Stantec that some people are familiar with. They're nationwide and have a lot of offices. But yeah, my whole time being in this field has been in Austin, and it's been a great place to learn the profession and work with really good professionals such as Tommy and landscape install contractors throughout those years. So at Oro, just the basis of what we generally work on, we do array of any project types, whether it's healthcare, hospitality, multifamily. We do some public realm stuff, down on Lady Bird Lake. We've got a project down there right now we're working on, and so in some industrial. So I think that's important as we talk through some of our conversation here. It depends on what our project type is sort of a different design approach that we take to each one. Some are less extensive and some are more, as you may know. But thanks again. Yeah, excited to be here and have a good conversation about bridging some gaps here. I think that are definitely needed in our industry. That we're all talking about the same thing, but there's some hurdles and obstacles that get put in our way that sometimes to connect the dots becomes a little bit more difficult. And we're all busy, so we're all running at 100 miles an hour, and it's hard to take time like this to sort of circle up and see if there's some common ground between our trades. So
no, there definitely is. So having done this and now the past 3-4 years with Takeoff Monkey, we see thousands of projects, any number of all types, SD, DD, 50% CDs, you name it. And we see a lot of the same projects repeatedly from the same contractor bidding them. And I know a lot of our customers, some of them may know, but I know a lot of them really don't fully understand what's going on behind the scenes. Why are we seeing the same project, but a slightly different plan set published so many different times? What's driving these changes? You know, as a contractor, we get hit with a 50-page plan set, and we don't know what's changed, but we have to go through and spend hours and hours and hours, and we find out, oh, they just moved the sidewalk 4 feet to the left, things like that. And so I know from working with you over the years that there is a lot going on behind the scenes. You're dealing with municipalities, government agencies, you're dealing with an owner who could be an array of different personalities. You've got a lot of things pushing on you. So I really wanted our audience and our customers to understand sort of the life of a project. Why are they getting these colored renderings and being asked to put a hard bid to them? You know, how does that, what was the original purpose, and how are they supposed to handle that and address that and still be in the running for the project? So I guess if we could start, if you could sort of give us a high level overview of the life of a project.
Yeah, so typically, depending on the project type, if it's an industrial warehouse that we're working on, and it's pretty clear cut. You know, if it's on a big acre tract, it's a big box building, you know, 200,000-300,000 square foot building. There's very minimal coordination that needs to occur between the building footprint and the civil engineer and the landscape architect. Right, there's the utilities that feed a building like that are pretty standard. They come in a couple different locations. We have enough acreage that if we need to modify our landscape, tree layouts, things like that, we have room to work. So those type of projects, clients generally just ask us to provide code minimum requirements. So whatever jurisdiction that we're in, if, you know, reading through the code, we need X amount of trees per so many square feet, or a street yard requirement and buffering requirement, we put together a permit set of plans that's just those minimum requirements. In that type of project, generally that's good enough to take that from soup to nuts and be a complete project. When we start diving into hospitality, multifamily, you know, public realm projects, things like that, a lot of these municipalities and jurisdictions, they're always evolving their code, and their code is always becoming more stringent. It's not becoming less, you know, less lax. So each year that we're working on projects, the code starts to become more evolved, and the requirements that not only we need to provide for our plan sets, but the civil engineers have to do even more than what we have to, right? From water quality, treatment, environmental preservation, things like that. So those type of projects also typically are on tracts of land that are zoned to be fully developed out, which means that at the end of the day, the impervious cover number is really high, and we're left with very little space to fit our requirements in that these jurisdictions are asking for. And so a lot of times we do a pay a fee in lieu of, because we can't even fit our minimum requirements onto the plan. But that, you know, a standard project like a hospitality or a multifamily, we start off the process with doing schematic design, and that's where we paint the pretty picture, right? That we put our artistic hat on and paint by numbers and put together a really pretty picture so that the developer and clients get excited about what the future amenities are going to be, or landscape enhancements that are going to occur on their property. Once we get sign off on that, then the next step would be doing the permitting drawings. And again, those are just bare bones, base minimum plans that will allow a client to get a TCO or occupancy for their facility. Those are ones that are on, within the city. Those have been approved by them, and that's what the city is going to come back and check to make sure that we've met those requirements before they allow them to occupy the building. Beyond that, then we start to dive into the embellished drawings, which is the design development. So we'll take the permit base and say the requirements said that we only had to do 10 trees for this certain project, but we want to do a tree grove, and we want to really enhance it and provide a lot of shade for pedestrians that are, whatever the design may be, and we want to put 50 trees in. Then that's where we start to develop those plans to show what the additions are and what the full extent of the amenity package and landscape package will be. Sometimes these are priced at 50% or 60% CD plans, but they're really typically just considered design development drawings. That they're not fully baked. They're honing in on our schematic plan that was colored and rendered, and starting to take that into actual CAD line work and start to develop out real square footages and real occupiable spaces. And so that's sort of the first stab at what we get from an architectural standpoint to start to define those areas. Generally, we see that get priced by the contractors, and then it comes back to us and they say, hey, we think that we're just throwing out numbers, $1 million over. So then we start to look at how we can peel back certain amenities or certain areas and start to decrease, so that we make sure that when we submit 100% CDs or construction documents, that we're really close to the target budget of what the client in the ownership side had in mind. So we, again, we have a schematic, design development, and a construction package, sort of 3 packages that are floating out there. Sometimes the architects have a hard time grasping that idea because we typically don't submit our plans with the building permit, at least in the Austin jurisdiction. You don't have to do that. Some other municipalities you have to, but our permit plans only go with the civil engineer because it's environmentally reviewed through the city of Austin.
Okay. So, Angelique, could you pull up those?
Yes, the slides.
Yeah. So the SD, the first page in there.
Let me go to the first page. I don't know why it started in the middle. There we go.
So the main purpose of something like this, Jason, when you put these together, is this to sort of illustrate your vision to the client?
Yeah. So this is to illustrate the overall vision, and the client sometimes don't know what they want until they see it. So when we start to throw out different variations of these designs, and then they get really excited about it, or they don't lean towards that, right? They say, oh, you may have too much open space here. We don't think we're gonna ever house events that would need that. Maybe we need more shading, or or more active areas that maybe we bring in a ping pong table or something, or cornhole set, something like that. So in this version, what you can see where that, I rotated it, so I apologize. Some of the numbers on there are sideways, but where the number 2 is, this original concept was an event lawn, open lawn. We had sort of a bandstand, or an elevated decking system on the left-hand side. And this was a covered pavilion that came over that. It had a lot of lighting and sound components, things like that, that they could have little concerts if they wanted. So again, the owner didn't really know that they wanted that, but this facility and the adjacent facility, they started talking to them, and they started talking about doing a shared use agreement that other buildings could come over and use this because it could be used for a music event center or something like that.
Okay. So when this lands in a contractor's inbox, and maybe it's a GC they like, maybe they like working with you. When I look at this, I see obviously some trees. You can make some assumptions. Would it behoove, the name of the game as a contractor is to include everything you can, but still have the lowest price. But I don't know that is necessarily helpful to you or your client.
Sure. Correct. Yeah. A lot of times what we try to advise our clients too that they really should not be bidding off of this, that this is meant internally to get an overall idea about what they like and what they want. Our group, what we do is that we run our own internal cost estimate, and this is based on numbers that I typically see for a year or two, and I take a best guess at what I think a 6-inch 200-gallon live oak would cost, right? And I plug in those numbers, and I come up with an estimated opinion to the client and say, I think this is going to run X amount of dollars. And I try to satisfy them with that instead of engaging a contractor to try to price this, because if I was a contractor, I wouldn't want to touch this, to be honest, right? Is that it's just you're fishing in a very large pond and just pulling numbers out of the air, because there's so many variables to what we're looking at right now on the screen, right? And the other thing that what I think these developers sometimes, like, we have clients that they have agreements with the city as well, so parkland dedication, other municipal or offsets that they do. So single family developers can do X amount of lots, and cities will do a cost sharing exercise with them, or reimburse them for certain aspects of it if the amenities that they're putting in is not only for their development but also for the surrounding community. So the city will match or become partners with the developers. So what we've run into lately is that these developers want to take our plans very early on and get pricing so that they can formulate some agreements with a city or a county and say, if, again, I'm throwing out numbers, but if it's $1 million, we'll put in 500, you put in 500, and we can build what is on sort of the pretty plan.
Okay.
So that's generally what we're seeing, and it's just the nature of the beast. That why I think some of these really early concepts are getting priced out or getting asked to get priced out is because there's shared use agreements that are associated with it from a contractual ownership standpoint.
That makes a ton of sense. So in a case like this, the lowest bid doesn't necessarily win. That's probably the one they throw out because
that's correct. Yeah, they typically we're doing one right now that we got 3 bids, and yeah, we took the median price of them. So it wasn't, nobody got awarded or nobody won or lost the bid, but we also got 3 bidders in the queue for the project as it develops further along with us through the stages.
So let's move ahead to the can we skip over to the DD plans?
Mm-hmm.
So when these come out, I realize DD has a different definition depending on which architect. Some guys DD are very, very well developed, and others are not. At this point, this would always be the point that I, as a contractor, would want to get on the phone with you or the architect and talk about your options, talk about plant availability and material selection and constructability, things like that. Is that if I didn't know you, I didn't have your number, I feel like that would be kind of an awkward call for a lot of contractors to just call up out of the blue. Hey, let's talk about your plans. How was that received?
So what we generally try to do, and this is through years of sort of talking with people like you, Tommy, and some other contractors in town, that this plan, if and I apologize it's so small, but if you look, like underneath the trees, we come in and we hatch everything that we think is going to be a planting bed, right? So we're trying to within the DD plans to try to really quantify all of these areas, what type of hardscape that we have in flat work, what type of site furnishings we have on a project, size and type of trees, shade trees, ornamental, and then also how much square footage of planting bed do we have. With that square footage, we then just give a typical plant list that we try to pare down and say, okay, on this project we're going to have 40 plants, and each plant, whatever, depending on what it is going to be a 5-gallon, 3-gallon, 1-gallon, or 4-inch pots. And so we're hoping that that's enough information to give to the contractor to say, okay, they're looking for very typical and available material, or they're looking for some really hard to find material that we haven't seen in months, or I've got to pay a lot of money to go get a certain type of agave or whatever that is. And so we're just still looking at a high level on our end, but also trying to get as many factors in there that you as a contractor can say, red flag, I know this is preliminary, but if you want to do a
like a 8-inch lacy oak in a 200-gallon container or something crazy.
Yeah, is that you can really start to come in and red flag and say, okay, here's what we think the numbers are, but as far as clarifications or exclusions or whatever, here's the assumption is that you're not going to be able to find this, or we can find it, it's just going to be outrageously expensive. And to me, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, we have a question about collaboration. And is it right? You did say that this is still early in the process. So are you saying that at this point forward, you start collaborating a bit more, and up to this point, it's just more internal discussions?
That's correct. Yeah. When we get to the DD, that's when we really like to talk with the bidders and see what questions and feedback that they have. I've learned this over the years as just being an employee, right, and working, and plans come back and we need to make a lot of adjustments to fit it within the budget. I was always frustrated just because I had to sort of redo the work or whatever that is, right? You know, we thought we had a really good design, now we have to pare it down. But now as a business owner, I have a different look at that, right? Is that uh, the more revisions and the less clear we are on our drawings, is that it costs me money from a design standpoint, right? That I myself has to redo it, and my employees that I pay, I have to pay to redo it. So if I don't submit a very clean and very clear design development package that produces a lot of questions and a lot of issues, or if I don't have the luxury to talk with a contractor and get some
Mhm.
feedback, is that it you know, that's where I start to lose money on my side, on the design side.
Right.
Well, and contractors
It's
too, the more they're
y-
bidding on something that they don't
that
know
Oh, bids
that's
are
correct.
free, please. Bids are
Yeah,
always free. Uh,
that
we have a question here. So when you are choosing your like plant material, especially, I know it's been really, really tight the past few years. Does it ever happen where your designers are picking up the phone or getting online and researching the availability?
so we try to do as much as that as we can. We a couple nurseries, we get their product lists and see what they have as far as stock. Uh, we typically find out, you know, for stuff that we do in Central Texas, we use a very native plant palette. So our majority of the planting that we put in, um, if if there's an issue finding it, we generally hear about that, or we hear from a contractor. But that's always good information that we welcome and that we love to hear, right? Is that if, you know, Tommy, or, you know, back in the day, you'd call up and say, hey, we're having a real hard time finding mountain laurels right now. And so, you know, we would talk as a studio, and we would make sure that as we're designing, we're not calling out for 1,000 mountain laurels to go in on a project, that we're being mindful of what those limitations are. And for example, I forget what year it was here. Was it 3 years ago, 2 years ago? When we had 2 years ago, when we had the big Texas
big
freeze.
freeze. Yeah.
It it really, the one of the good things I think that came out of that was that there was a little bit more connection in conversations between architects and suppliers, and contractors that are saying, hey, you know, mountain laurels, just for example, was one of those trees that nobody could get their hands on um, in Austin or Central Texas. So uh, you know, that was, as detrimental as that was to the horticulture and nursery standpoint. It did generate a lot of good talks in phone calls that we had gotten, or that we would pick up the phone and verify, to say, hey, here's our list. What can you typically, or what issues have you seen through here that you can't find?
You know, that's good. So I know I've run into it in the past, like when you were at TBG, where I'd get a bid set from a GC, and then I'd call and have discussions with you or whomever, and then I would kind of take heat from the general contractor, or maybe they got heat from the owner. What does that dynamic look like?
Yeah, I think, um, yeah, from a general contractor standpoint, uh, as of lately, it seems like they're more willing and okay with uh, people having conversations, you know, sidebar conversations, because at the end of the day, the contractor, every project is over budget. And
Of
we've
course.
got, you know, we have hundreds of projects that we're working on, and there's not one that they came in and said, hey, we're totally fine, we're on budget, we're going to move forward. Uh, that there's some kind of tweaking that has to occur. Uh, how our profession is, it is a little bit challenging, because when they set the budgets and they start erecting a building, they need to put in a door, and they got to put in the driveway, and they've got to put in, there's certain aspects of it that they just have to do and that they've already committed to. A lot of clients, and depending on their personality, they view landscape as, oh well, if we just run over, we're just automatically, it's, the first thing that gets hit is the landscape. We're gonna tone back the trees. We're gonna tone back all the planting, irrigation, things like that, which we're all tied to those decisions. So I think there's a long roundabout way of saying, I think the general contractors are willing to work with us more now than ever, and the landscape contractors, to say, hey, how do we make sure that what you're bidding on from a landscape perspective, I don't have to come and do a whole lot of tweaking and adjusting later on. If we can get a really solid number, get it plugged into the performa, then that's sort of a problem solved. And then I just have to wait 3.5 years for my doors and windows to show up. Right? They've got some other issues that they're having to track down instead of dealing with landscaping.
So as a contractor, the goal is obviously to sell more and more work. In your eyes as a landscape architect, what are things that a contractor can do during the bidding process that's going to make his or her bid stand out and stand above their competition?
I think just clarity. If you, depending on how you bid it, I'm okay with a contractor saying, your spec for this is a little bit overkill. I think that we can do this, or I've got, instead of 5-gallon material, I can get this at 3-gallon, and it'll be a very good savings. I welcome those type of assumptions, and they get listed out within the bid, because we're open to a lot of those. If I can change from a 5-gallon to a 3-gallon, and I can keep some site furnishings in my package, that's something I'm definitely going to be open to. And so I think, just through the bidding process, no matter what your number is, as much as you can break it down, it really provides a clear picture for us as the architect, and in coordinating with the client, to say, I think we can get there, right? And I understand too, right? The from a contractor standpoint, not to show all your cards as to where all your money is, so that you don't, you may have some profit built in a little bit more on one end or the other, or on one item or the other. But instead of just saying your landscaping or your irrigation number is just one number, it makes it really hard to come back and tone that back, right? Or if we have some competitive bids, to filter through those and say, okay, which one was a good bid and which one was a better bid, makes it a little bit more difficult.
Definitely.
Yeah. Jason, we have sorry.
I would say
thought.
just one other, on that thought process is I've done a lot of work down in Houston, and a lot of that was public work, and through that you had to submit. We prepared the bid form for all the contractors to use, so it was 100 knockout roses. What's your unit price and what's your total number? As a contractor, I would hate to bid that way. To be honest, right? But from our standpoint, it made it everything was so transparent, right? Is that I easily took 15 bids that I would get in, and I'd throw them all in a spreadsheet and say, okay, this person is, really good through here, that has a couple high numbers. This person's high all the way through. This person's low all the way through. It really shows what the differences is, are in how certain contractors bid. So, again, I don't think that you need to bid and be as transparent as that, but it does make it a lot easier, and a lot easier for us to get under contract quicker with a contractor. We've had projects that have been so far over budget, and the developer has tried to work with a certain contractor and try to nickel and dime them, right, to get it into budget. Well, the process takes so long that by the time we sort of get to where we think we're comfortable, right, you guys get price hikes. So then we sort of go back to square one, and we go through another month or two of nickel and, the contractor nickel, or the developer nickel and diming him, and then he gets another price hike. So I'm in the middle trying to advise the client, here's your best contractor, here's the best number. I think we can work with them here, here, and here, and draw that down and get them under contract, and let's get them working. That's really my goal as an architect, is try to salvage, so to say, as much as our original design intent in our overall design and theme and how we want to present the project, and get it constructed as close to that vision as we originally had.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a question in here from Amy. When I first started in the industry, architects and owners used to book material for large jobs with growers directly. Have you ever done that?
So we would contract grow certain things. We had a project up in Dallas that we spec'd out like 10,000 Mexican feathergrass, and we contract grew that. But it's done on special occasions, but we don't typically get into that. It seems like it's just such a liability on a couple different fronts, right? On the ownership side and on the contractor side, that if something goes bad, that people are left holding the bag on. And in trees are hard to do that, just from a longevity standpoint, right? If you contract grow some hardwood trees, you really have to make sure that you're committed to your fiscal responsibilities, that you are gonna use those trees and absorb those and use those. What I found was more productive and more it worked better, was that some of the developers on single family developments, say it's a 2,500 acre piece of land, we will actually carve out 100 acres of it. That's, wherever the land plan is, where we know that it's far away and it's going to get developed out over a 5 to 8 or 10 year period. And we'll go out there and grow material there and create an on-site tree farm for them. We did a lot of that in Houston, but those were with pines and things like that, softer woods that would grow faster and grow. But we generally we had a whole open tree farm that we could go get whatever we wanted, and as many of them as we wanted. So that process worked out really well.
What about not just contract growing, but maybe you go to select trees in Georgia or somewhere and you just love their material? I used to see it now and then, but now almost never, where you actually put on the legend 10 to 12 foot Nellie R. Stevens from grower ABC. What is that, a liability thing as well, or
it's not really a liability. I just don't know, when we pull together our plans, if we know exactly who's going to be bidding on a set of plans, that gives us a better idea about previous work that a contractor has done, what their capabilities are, and maybe the type of material that they're used to getting in, or in growers that they have connections with. But we'll it's not, again, it's not really a liability, but if the client comes back and the number is super outrageous, they sometimes come to us and they say, why did you get so specific on where that comes from?
Oh yeah.
We really have to be committed to, if it's a very integral part to our design, and how the overall project is going to feel and look at the end of the day, we generally don't single source suppliers, just because of that.
Yeah, if it was way overpriced or unavailable, I'd be the first one to throw up my hands and say, talk to the architect. Not my problem.
Yeah. And I get it, and I deserve to get a phone call if we're speccing out material that's very hard to find and very expensive. But if we do, like EDI, for example, John Hillis, we have a really good relationship with him, and if we know that we need a 12-inch live oak or something, we'll put in there to source it out of from him, and then we can actually go through his farm and we'll go pick the tree that we want. That's within the last couple of years, that's sort of as far as we've gone with specifying maybe sole source or single source supplier.
We do have another question about let's see, value engineering on designers' plans, because they didn't have enough insight on the site conditions. So, can you speak a bit to that?
Yes, Gary. So yeah, we know all about VE. VE is, we were talking about that earlier. It's common game. We were talking about it with the DD set, where when a contractor can come in and show Jason that he can save X dollars by switching from a 5 to a 3, then he can add in some site furnishings. Is there, Jason, any VE? I mean, I used to feel like I was the king of VE back in my day.
But you always qualified it. So
qualify, of course. But was there any VE that would come with a big sexy number that you would just hate seeing, that it was just going to sabotage your whole design intent?
Not in particular. One of the things that we see that gets VE'd or during the bidding process is soil prep, right? Soil prep is one of those things that you don't really notice. You don't, unless your architect's out there a lot and brings a shovel with them or sees it during the install. That some contractors, instead of doing a 6-inch topsoil for lawn areas, they'll go to 4 or 3 and just hope that they don't get caught, right? Or that nobody mentions it. And this is where it gets tricky, and we sort of get ourselves in a bind, is that I personally think that we don't need 6 inches. The city of Austin requires 6 inches for all undisturbed or all disturbed areas.
Right.
I think it's a great spec to have, but I think that costs an enormous amount of money when you start to look at some of these really large developments and what that actual cubic yardage starts to equate to.
Huge.
Huge, right? Yeah. And so I think that that 4 inches is ample, all the way down to even like 3.5. For me, for sod, that's still a really good growing medium and growing base to get sod established. And as long as it gets on a good maintenance schedule, uh, that that's a good solution to a value engineer, right? But where we get stuck in that is that the environmental inspector with the city of Austin is the one that if they catch that, then they sort of come to us or they come to the civil engineer and they say, did you approve this, or who approved the non-code compliance? And or the contractor has to rip that up and now put down, and then we're, people are sort of pointing at one another.
Yeah.
So those are tricky if there's not, and same way with like the planting, like our specs, we typically err on the high side, right? I want as deep of good planting, topsoil compost mixed in as deep of a profile as I can get. But I also understand that the deeper I go, the more it costs. And those are hidden things that you don't realize or recognize from day one. Years down the road, your plant material all looks better and generally seems healthier and whatever. But yeah, it's a tricky dance. But I don't know if I generally spec a lot of container material. So generally the first value engineer that we see is B&B material.
Yep. And how do you like that?
And it depends on the project. I'm open to it if it's in a, if we're doing a large open park, or we're doing a big event lawn, or and there's some areas that I can take those B&B trees, and I'm looking to just get the height and they're still okay trees, right? There's nothing wrong with a B&B tree. But if I can still maintain and keep a couple of container trees that are specimen and have good form and structure and sort of keep those in the forefront, then I'm fine with that. That's a good solution and a good, I think sort of meeting halfway into that. And sometimes the numbers are just so good that the client's like, I don't care where you want them, we're using B&B trees, right?
Right.
And
yeah.
So I get it.
So yeah, the soil, the soil could always, especially in Austin where the native soil is not great or non-existent, the soil could absolutely destroy your job financially, or it could really make it. Yeah. And so yeah, that there was always a lot of VE opportunity there. What other, is there any other VE that is just like a no-fly zone, like site furnishings, any of the hardscape?
Yeah, I mean, none of it's a no-fly zone, right? I mean, I respect everybody sort of doing their own due diligence, or if they just have a really good in on certain things. Site furnishings are generally one of those that they're just expensive across the board, right? If we sort of value engineer certain things down, I don't mind if a contractor says, hey, we can do this bench for this dollar amount. And then sometimes then that at least gives me an idea, okay, we're stuck at $800 or $600 a bench. I need to go find one for that. It may not be the bench that I like or that I want.
Right.
But if I know the dollar amount, then I can start to maybe go back to the drawing board and do my own research or try to find something.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'd say irrigation just as a talking point too. I think that there's a lot of ways to maybe cut some corners in through there, and draw some bids down. Years ago, I used to see a lot of like people trying to put in the wrong valves, try to do the wrong couplings. And this is a lot of Houston work again that I was doing. But nowadays I don't really see that. An irrigation bid, I go through, and when I turn all the zones on and I start to flip open valve boxes, they've got the right, the grease fittings and all that. Like it doesn't seem like contractors are installing sort of maybe some of the other corners that were cut, maybe 10 years ago, just say.
Yeah. Go ahead, Angela.
I'd just like to give us a warning on time, because I did set this up for an hour long and we're at 57 minutes. So I think, if there's any last comments that anybody wants to make, or, I don't want to cut off as you're talking.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, I apologize if I start to ramble.
No.
My wife will tell you I just start rambling sometimes.
No.
So, but I do appreciate you guys inviting me onto the podcast here. It's my first one, and it's exciting though. It's a topic that I love, and I love the a lot of years I did just straight field work. And I loved it because I loved the connection and coordination and communication with contractors, right? Is that I see, and to me, that's sort of what I think, from a landscape architecture standpoint, that's where I learned the most. Is when I was young, I would draw things on the computer and I would print them out, and I would go out in the field, and the contractor would look at me and say, how would you build this? And then I'd sit there and scratch my head, and I say, okay, you got a very good point. There's so it, then when I'd go back into the office and spend time behind the computer, I would approach certain things and doing my set of drawings of, if I was a contractor looking at these, what would I want to see, and how would I want to see those? And to me, that was the biggest teaching and learning experience, was being forced to maybe put that different lens on it. And I know that it's not easy, right? You're getting some plans that are half baked, or that were rushed out the door, and they say make this look beautiful and make it on time and make it under budget.
Yeah.
So.
Well, man, thank you for coming on. I mean, I think I speak for quite a few contractors out there. Sometimes approaching the architect is an uncomfortable dynamic. So I hope you change the minds of a lot of folks out there, that you're just like us, regular old, approachable, relatable people.
Yeah, that's what I say. Feel free to call me up if anybody has any questions, beyond this or whatever, or reach out to Tommy. But if you on your projects, I think having just an easy approach and say, hey, how do we work together to make sure that we get this within budget? It's like anything. If we go to the owner and say the design has to do this, the owner generally pushes back on us pretty hard. Right. And when I get contractors that would approach me and say, your drawings are really, really bad and they're terrible, and you have to do this, naturally I sort of provide a little pushback, right?
Sure.
Just defensively I do that. But but then, so again, I think it's, it's all, hey, we're all in it together. We got a project, we need it built. It's got to be done at some budget. So how do we collaborate and take parts of what we want to do, and how you guys think that we can do that at a cheaper or an easier solution, and we're on board with it. Majority of landscape architects are very easy to work with. So
Everybody go home and call your local landscape architect. Invite him out for a beer, a round of golf.
Yeah,
that's the magic happen.
And I think it's great to hear from your perspective, and we should all work together better or more often, but it's sometimes hard to do when you're so busy. But we should reach out to each other, to the other disciplines, and try to make it work.
It is, and it's one thing too, and so we're from a design standpoint, we're sort of at the tail end of how a lot of things get baked, right? That an architect and a civil engineer are generally on projects a lot sooner than we are, because they're working through entitlements, drainage issues. The architect obviously dealing with the building and getting that all designed. So we typically come in a little bit later onto these projects. So and through that whole process is that everybody involved is super overloaded and behind, and there's little bits and pieces that aren't getting communicated. And it's just the nature of the environment that we're in right now. Everybody's super busy. And so I think, unfortunately, there are packages that are going out the door in our industry that aren't where they should be. But the developers trying to hit, getting plans out the door so that they beat the next price hike on everything, right? So again, like we said, we're all in it together to try to figure out how do we bake the cake as best as we can with the ingredients that we've got. So
awesome. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time. Angelique, thank you for putting this together and making this a reality. I hope everyone got a lot out of this and have a different perspective on the next landscape architect you have to do battle with. I mean, work with.
There you go. Well said, brother. I like it.
Keep collaborating. Yeah.
Yeah. Angelique, I really appreciate it, and thank you.
All right.
Thanks for your time, and everyone in our audience too. Please give us feedback if you have time. Thanks.